Hey gang, Sam Newman, Denver Realtor here. I am just out for a walk with the dog on this lovely Denver day, and today I want to do something a little different. Recently I sat down with Nick Sundahl, who's a realtor in the Twin Cities area up in Minneapolis-St Paul. He is known as Minneapolis Living on YouTube. He's got a great YouTube channel. You should check it out. You may know I'm from Minnesota originally. I've been in Denver for over a decade, love it here, but there is actually a lot of migration between those two cities, so we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about the similarities, you know, the differences. What's the weather like in Denver versus the Twin Cities? Our favorite restaurants, our favorite parts of town, those types of things. So if you're considering moving from Minnesota to Denver or vice versa, it may be useful to you. Anyway, really enjoyed the conversation and hope you do too.
Well, let's get into it. Sam, thanks for agreeing to do this video with me. So coincidentally, you are from the Twin Cities.
I am.
Area,
yes.
I should say.
Yeah. I'm
Greater Metro.
The farmland / woods up to the north there.
Okay.
I'm from Chisago Lake, so probably a 45-minute drive from the Twin Cities. Grew up there and bounced around a little bit. So I've been in Denver for just over a decade, but get back all the time. And Minnesota is near and dear to my heart.
So when we're talking about the Denver area, where exactly are you located in Denver, and in terms of in relation to, say, downtown?
Yep. So I'm in a neighborhood called Park Hill. So it's in Denver proper. It's probably 3.5 miles from downtown. So pretty close. And it is on the east side of town. We have a big park that anybody who's familiar with Denver will know. It's called City Park. And then Park Hill is just to the east of that. So it's a great place to be. I've done a lot of work, and a lot of my videos have been focused on the Park Hill area, especially starting out.
So when you think about Denver, some of the biggest questions that I get when people are looking to move to the Twin Cities area is, what is the weather like?
Yes, it's a funny misconception that happens a lot, mostly because of like Coors Light commercials, I feel like. But right. It's Denver actually gets a decent amount of snow, but it's not super snowy. So it's next to the mountains, but it's located on the plains. So one of the great parts about Denver is the proximity to the mountains, but we're not actually in the mountains, which if you haven't been here, it gets a little confusing. So, but our weather is, I believe, average snowfall, we're actually more than Minneapolis-St Paul on a yearly basis. We average about 60 inches of snowfall, which is a lot for a metro area. The thing about it is the average temperature is a little higher. Like our January average high is 46. And in November, I think it's in the mid 50s. So what ends up happening is we get a lot of snow and then it melts. And then it snows and it melts and it snows and it melts. I mean, a lot of these side streets in these residential neighborhoods, they won't even plow because they know it'll melt in a day or two. And it is extremely normal to have days in the mid 60s in January, February. You know, it's not happening all the time, but it's not out of the ordinary at all. And that sounds nice. Yeah. Well, what I always say is this is not a real winter from compared to what I'm used to, right? Coming from where, there's something about that too. I love going back to Minnesota over like Christmas and stuff like that and taking my kids and being like, this is what it's like. This is just that white landscape and there's something beautiful about it. But for you guys, what do you tell people when they're like, I'm thinking about moving, how bad is it?
It doesn't help me to not be transparent. Right. Sure. So we can talk about averages all you want, but, we get cold snaps. And I think that's where, again, when we're talking about misconceptions, that it's always frigid because, you look at the news, you're like, look at what's going on in Minneapolis and it's, negative 32 wind chills. And we just recently had that the last couple of days. So it's one of those things where, yes, it's pretty horrible. It's pretty manageable though if it's only 24 to 48 hours. I think we're ahead of schedule at this point because our snowiest month is not actually December, January, or February. It's actually March.
Oh yeah.
Because that's when we get the most precipitation.
Right.
And it just tends to be a little bit, it stays cool. So right now, average temperature in January is I think 25 degrees this time of year. We're hovering right around that today. So, once you have a couple of years here, I don't think it's all that difficult to manage. That being said, some of those cold snaps in February really, really can get to you. I'm not going to not going to lie, there's the hope for a warm March is pretty common.
I know what you mean too. I remember that. It's like February, holidays are over, right? It's been a few months of winter, and you're just like, oh God, we're still doing this. But I will say that is what makes spring so amazing in Minnesota. I mean, honestly.
And I think you probably have the same thing living in Colorado, where you actually have seasons.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, yes, I'm sure it would be very nice to live in a place year round where it's just always gorgeous and you can, sit out in the sun. But there is something to be said about the season change and looking forward to what those seasons bring. That being said, about mid-January to the end of February is probably the hardest part of living in this state, just because it's like, okay, I'm over the winter. Holidays can make that go by pretty quick. But then it's like, let's move on. Okay, so when we're talking about Denver versus the Twin Cities, the funny thing is that there are a lot of transplants between the cities and Denver, and I think it's because the quality of life is very similar.
Yeah.
And this is just from friends that I know that have lived in that area before and then lived here or moved from one point to the next. That it's such a similar way of life that's what the attraction is, and why there's like a kind of a freeway, if you will, of transfers.
Yeah, the similarities I see, I mean, really between the city of Denver and the Twin Cities, there's a lot of them. I mean, great food scenes, like great dining for both of them. Does seem to be similar, I guess, that I think Minneapolis-St Paul is very active, and Denver is very active too. And so
I hear it's like the Twin Cities, Denver and Portland are all in competition with each other for the most bike paths.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The most outdoor.
I think you guys are beating us on bikes too, man. The cities are so bike friendly. If you go up to Boulder, that's very bike friendly there. They're about to stop allowing cars altogether. They're just bike paths.
Yeah. So it's light rail and bikes.
Yeah. Right? But you see breweries. Denver's often referred to as the Napa Valley of beer, but I see similarities in the Twin Cities too. Surly, Summit, there's some iconic breweries there, and that culture of like just sort of community, going to a place and trying local things. I think that there's a lot of that in both these places too.
Well, I don't have as much experience being obviously in Denver, but I would agree with you. The food scene and I would definitely see in terms of distilleries and breweries here have exploded over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So those people who are looking for maybe get in on that industry, there is a lot. Mm-hmm. So what are you looking for? Like if somebody wanted to buy a home in, whether it was in Denver or kind of even where you are living, what are we looking for in, say, like a median sale price for like single family home? The traditional home, right? The single family home, not new construction, previously owned, traditional sale, that kind of stuff. What are we looking at? What would I have to spend to get into something like that?
Yeah, in the whole Denver metro, the median sale price for the last 2-ish years was hovering right around 500,000, right around $500,000. In the last 6 to 9 months, that's boosted, and in many areas, that's over 600,000. But it really just depends. It really just depends what you're looking for, because if you're looking for a big house in Denver proper, it's going to be more than that, almost certainly. If you're looking to buy your first home, even if you do want to be in the city, it's not. I work with a lot of buyers who don't have a $650,000 budget.
Sure.
And we do fine. Especially if you get creative and look at some of the different areas, not new builds necessarily, but newer areas, 90s, 2000s.
Sure.
I had a client, first time home buyer. We got him into a nice place, yard, 4-bedroom house for $470,000. I know you guys have a strong market too. What are you seeing?
Yeah. If we just do single family homes, traditional sale. So, not a foreclosure, a short sale, and then they're previously owned. Our median sale price is at $360,000.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's Minneapolis-St Paul and effectively the 7-county metro area. So that covers quite a swath. We're talking about the suburbs, right? We're talking anywhere from probably 45 minutes from downtown. So even out to where, you're from. And those homes, like if you don't mind, if you have to work in one of these, if you not working remotely, which is unlikely these days, but if you do have to commute into the city or around, going 45 minutes, if that's not a problem for you, then there are plenty of properties that you can get into in that 275 to kind of 350 range, which I feel like is actually pretty reasonable if you compare it to the rest of, the national market.
Oh yeah, that sounds great.
You're right. Well, right. By what you just said, that being said, there are, just like most areas, they're really dictated by school districts, and the Twin Cities is really no different. They will drive. So there are certain pockets that are just absolutely going bonkers. For example, just on the west side of town tends to be a little bit higher price point. So Minneapolis and then west, Hennepin County effectively is the most affluent in terms of median household income and price points for your single family homes. But for example, I had an out-of-town buyer coming on from Chicago, and we did a virtual tour, and it was listed at 6.25. And, after looking at it, they said, well, where do you think we're going to be? And I said, man, it's got to have a 7 in front of it, right? Like I know it's going to be at least that, and it's probably going to be a bit more. So we didn't even touch it because they were like, we didn't want to, get into that kind of bidding situation.
Right.
3 months later, when I saw it actually closed for 800 in cash.
Oh, man.
So it's kind of like, okay, well, and I know this is very anecdotal, right? This is just one small snippet, and I don't mean to scare anybody out there that's looking to purchase a home in the Twin Cities. Like this is one, and frankly, it was a gorgeous home.
Yeah,
it really was beautiful in a very desirable neighborhood. So where that, again, it's one single story, but that's when you have a really great house in a really desirable neighborhood, that's what we're seeing. So like if I wanted to move to Denver, where would be some places? And I obviously we don't want to talk about like where would you live and where do you think the best places are necessarily, because we can't really do that. However, if where some place, if I was a Rockies fan, and are there places that I can live where that's like walkable?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And again, it just depends what you want. I mean, the Rockies play downtown, but there's a lot of good neighborhoods around there. I mean, the downtown neighborhood, there's great opportunity. One of the few opportunities we've seen that kind of goes underlooked is the condo market because of what has happened the last 2 years, really, with COVID, people wanting to move out, wanting that home office, like you mentioned, just wanting more room. Well, now these downtown areas that market for at least a lot of the past year and a half was depressed a little bit. It's coming back now. But if that's what you're looking at, if you want to move here, you're maybe a first-time home buyer or just want to get something and get into the area and kind of figure out. And if you want to be around the Rockies, there's like River North, like I mentioned, Rhino, downtown, and there's a couple other neighborhoods around there. I actually did a video on 3 affordable neighborhoods in Denver, and one of them was Capitol Hill. We call it Cap Hill, and that is just really close to everything that downtown has to offer, and a lot of good, just
mostly condos in that.
Yeah, mostly condos. Yep,
sure.
Condos and just other detached properties. There are some single family homes too, but the prices there just haven't appreciated the way they have other places. Maybe because parking's bad. That's like the one negative.
Do you feel like that might be an opportunity?
Absolutely. Yeah.
If somebody was looking, like, wanted that more city lifestyle, see that as like, hey, there might be some value in these properties because they haven't kind of appreciated at the same rate. Now, of course, in my opinion and in my experience, we've seen that they're the first ones to kind of lose.
Yeah, that's probably
like
true
value. Mm-hmm. Of course, value is a completely different, however you want to define that. But
yeah. Well, yeah, and when your real estate market has a pretty strong backbone, like it would take quite a bit for the floor to fall out,
Sure.
Yep. I feel pretty comfortable at least, you know, just explaining that to people where you may not have rapid appreciation all of a sudden like we've had, but you know, it's a pretty safe investment overall. And again, you get to live in it. So at the very least, there's that. Do you see opportunity in any kind of any part of town?
I would say if you wanted to live in the city proper, like if you wanted to live in Minneapolis or in St. Paul, then I would probably look to some neighborhoods in South Minneapolis, and into Northeast Minneapolis. That's where we're probably seeing the most opportunity for growth, especially since, you know, Minneapolis overall, the homes were built anywhere from the late 1800s to about 1940 or so. Wow. And then once you get into, say, the first ring suburbs is what we call them here, the Edinas, the St. Louis Parks, the Golden Valleys, Robbinsdale on the west side, and then you go to like Fridley, Columbia Heights, you know, Little Canada, things like that on the east side, northeast, and then what have you. But once you get into those, the homes start changing into like that 1950s, 1960s ranch or rambler, as we call them here. And so depending on what you're looking for, all those homes tend to be on the smaller side.
Gotcha.
Then we bump out, and all of a sudden you're looking at like the executive 2 stories that are now when we're talking about price point, that 360 doesn't exist anymore, right? The 360s comes from homes that are in like North Minneapolis, Northeast Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, where, you know, they're older homes, they're smaller homes, and they just can't command top, you know, huge numbers because, well, they don't sit on massive lots and they don't have the square footage. Right. So I would say South Minneapolis and Northeast, if you want to stay proper. If you're looking for, maybe if you're willing to move out, I would go outside of Hennepin County, frankly, because the taxes in Hennepin County are higher than if you were to go to Wright County, which is a little further west, Scott County, Carver County on the west side. Those have been growth. I see Victoria, Minnesota, which is just on the south side of Lake Minnetonka, as a huge growth market. It's not the biggest of towns, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity for builds. So if you can grab some land and do like a custom build, there's a lot of opportunity there. All right, so let me let's wrap it up here a little bit. What's your favorite place to go eat in the Denver metro?
Oh boy, that is a tough one.
All right, give me a couple then.
Yeah, no,
give me your favorite spots.
I could go a few different directions with it, but there's a place. It's an Asian fusion place called Sholan, and there's actually two of them, and they open up one closer to me, and it's got it's just really cool. What I love about this place, and what I love about going out to eat at certain places, that they have things I'm never going to make at home. These, you know, French onion soup dumplings and this toast that you dip in the thing, and it's a whole experience. And it's awesome. I'm never, you know, and I enjoy a good steak as much as anybody else, but you know, I can do that.
You make a steak.
Yeah, I can't do whatever they're doing at Shalon. So that is it's a part of a really good restaurant group, and that's one of my favorites. What about you?
Well, I don't really have a one place, but I do have a place where you can get almost anything, where I go all the time to get a slew of different items. And that's the North Loop. And that's right near the Twins Target Field. So it's adjacent to Target Field. It's essentially a street that has where you can go to one of my favorite places, Bar La Grassa. It's an Italian place does small plates and also large plates. So I love going there with my wife, and we get just a dozen small plates and we nibble on everything. And so one of my, and honestly, a great experience every time I go. So that's definitely one of the places that I like to go, but that North Loop area is awesome because it just has so many choices. Sam, tell me why do you love living in Denver, or why do people love living in the Denver metro area?
Yeah, it's got a fair amount going for it. I do think the active lifestyle, I do think like the food and beverage scene is great, but really what it boils down to for me, and I think most people, it's the proximity to the mountains. I mean, it's really hard to beat, to have, if you like doing anything outdoors at all, just hiking, camping, but skiing, snowboarding, all of that stuff. We have some pretty world-class places to do that, just sort of right just to the west of us, which is nice.
How far, like if I wanted to go to a real mountain and go boarding, what's the closest one to hit?
Probably about an hour.
Okay.
If you're going to go a real one, you could go, there's a place called Loveland Ski Area, which is right on the Continental Divide. And it's before you go through the tunnel to get to all these other ski towns. And it's just no frills. It's cheaper than everywhere else. It's great skiing. You can just drive up and park for free. And it's, if anybody doesn't want to spend $1,000 a day to go skiing out here, it's right. Such a great experience.
Okay. That's awesome.
I will say though, the one big thing I miss is the lakes. We have very little water here, and that is such a great feature of the Twin Cities area in Minnesota.
And it's one of the things that keeps people here, right? I mean, and I think we kind of address this, but quality of life is probably why you see a lot of that path between the two areas. But obviously, lakes, outdoor stuff. Even in the winter, there are things to do. Even when it gets a little harder when we're getting to that 20 below stuff. Sure. But generally speaking, we've got a park. If you're anywhere in like the cities or the metro area, but especially Minneapolis, there's a park no more than 6 miles away from you. So like now they're not all huge parks, but I live right next to Theo Worth Park, which is the largest park in the Twin Cities metro. And they've got cross-country ski paths that go for miles upon miles upon miles, and sled hills, and a golf course in the summer. And so like in terms of being able to do all sorts of outdoor stuff, and then lakes literally in the city that you can go just hang out at the beach. Yeah. Not really the most swimmable lakes, but that being said, but you're still just laying out in the sun and playing volleyball and doing that kind of outdoor stuff. So, you get not only the outdoor stuff, but world-class healthcare and great public school system. And I think that's why a lot of people choose. And then we've got a lot of Fortune 500 companies that people like to work for. So, well, Sam, awesome. I think for anybody that's, whether they're looking to move to the Twin Cities from Denver or vice versa, they got a little bit of information here. And clearly they've got somebody that can help them if they're leaving Denver, or if they're leaving the Twin Cities and moving to Denver. We can certainly, we can help you. So I appreciate you taking the time to kind of chat about our respective communities. And if you ever need anything on my end, obviously let me know.
Oh yeah. Well, the pleasure is all on this side of the Zoom call. And I think you're right. I think it's great having resources in both of these places, especially since they do share a lot of similarities, and there's a lot of moving back and forth. So I just always encourage people, if you have any other questions, reach out. Nick, you have your phone number right there on the wall. I got to work on that, maybe in the next office. Well, no, this was so much fun doing this today. So I appreciate it.
Well, man, we will talk to you soon.